Hello, and welcome to my channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud. This is a little blue book. Just happens to be little blue book number 24, and it is titled The Kiss and Other Stories by Anton Chekhov. And this is part 3. We left off at the top of page 29. How stupid! How stupid! Thought Ryabovich, watching the hurrying ripples. How stupid everything is. Now that hope was dead, the history of the kiss, his impatience, his ardor, his vague aspirations, and delusion appeared in a clear light. It no longer seemed strange that the general's horseman had not come, and that he would never again see her who had kissed him by accident instead of another. On the contrary, he felt it would be strange if he did ever see her again. The water flew past him, whether and why he knew The water flew past him, whither and why no one knew. It had flown past in May. It had sped a stream into a great river, a river into the sea. It had floated on high in mist and fallen again in rain. It might be the water of May was again spreading past another Ryobovich's eyes. For what purpose? Why? And the whole world, life itself, seemed to Ryabovich an inscrutable, aimless mystification. Raising his eyes from the stream and gazing at the sky, he recalled how fate, in the shape of an unknown woman, had once caressed him. He recalled his summer fantasies and images, and his whole life seemed to him unnaturally thin and colorless and wretched. When he reached the cabin, his comrades had disappeared. His servant informed him that all had set out to visit General von Rabkin. Is that the right page? Yep. General von Rabkin, who had sent a horseman to bring them. For a moment, Ryobovich's heart thrilled with joy, but that joy he extinguished. He cast himself upon his bed, and wroth with his evil fate, as he wished to spite it, ignored the invitation. A work of art. Holding under his arm an object wrapped in a newspaper, Sasha Smirnov, the only son of his mother, walked nervously into the office of Dr. Chekhov. "Well, my dear boy," exclaimed the doctor warmly, "how do you feel today? What's the good news?" Sasha began to blink with his eyes, put his hands over his heart, and stammered nervously. "My mother sends her regards and begs to thank you. I am my mother's only son, and you have saved my life, and we both heartily know how to thank you." "Come, my young friend, let us not speak of it," interrupted the doctor, literally melting with pleasure. "I have only done what anyone else in my place would have done. I am the only son of my mother. We are poor people, and consequently we are not in position to pay you for your trouble. And it makes it very embarrassing for us, doctor, although both of us, mother and I, who am the only son of my mother, beg of you to accept from us a token of our gratitude, this object which is an object of rare worth, a wonderful masterpiece in antique bronze." The doctor made a grimace. "Why, my dear friend," he said, "it is entirely unnecessary. I don't need this in the least." "Oh, no, stammered Sasha. "I beg you, please accept it." He began to unwrap the bundle, continuing his entreaties in the meantime. "If you do not accept this, you will offend both my mother and myself. This is a very rare work of art, an antique bronze. It is a relic left by my dead father. We have been prizing it as a very dear remembrance. My father used to buy up bronze antiques, selling them to lovers of old statuary, and now we continue in the same business, my mother and myself." Sasha undid the package and enthusiastically placed it on the table. It was a low candelabrum of antique bronze, a work of real art representing a group. On a pedestal stood two figures of women clad in the costume of Mother Eve, and in poses that I have neither the audacity nor the temperament to describe. These figures were smiling conquitishly, and in general gave one the impression that, were it not for the fact that they were obliged to support the candlestick, they would leap down from their pedestal and exhibit a performance which, my dear reader, I am even ashamed to think of. When the doctor espied the present, he slowly scratched his head, cleared his throat, and blew his nose. "Yes, indeed, a very pretty piece of work," he mumbled. "But how shall I say it? Not quite, I mean, rather unconventional. Not a bit literary, is it? You know, oh, the devil knows. Why? Beelzebub himself could not have conceived anything more ugly. Should I place such a phantasmagoria upon my table, I would pollute my entire home." "Why, doctor, what a strange conception you have of art!" cried Sasha in offended tones. "This is a real masterpiece. Just look at it." "Such is its harmonious beauty that just to contemplate it fills the soul with ecstasy and makes the throat choke down a sob. When you see such loveliness, you forget all earthly things. Just look at it. What life, what motion, what expression!" "I quite understand all this, my dear boy," interrupted the doctor, "but I am a married man. Little children run in and out of this room, and ladies come here continually." "Of course," said Sasha. "If you look at it through the eyes of the rabble, you see this noble masterpiece in an entirely different light. But you certainly are above all that, doctor. And especially when your refusal to accept this gift will deeply offend both my mother and myself, who am the only son of my mother. You have saved my life, and in return we give you our dearest possession, and my only regret is that we are unable to give you the mate to this candelabrum." "Thanks, my friend. Many thanks. Remember me to your mother, and... But for God's sake! You can see for yourself, can't you? Little children run in and out of this room, and ladies come here continually. However, leave it here. There's no arguing with you." "Don't say another word," exclaimed Sasha joyously. "Put the candelabrum right here, next to the vase. By Jove, but it's a pity that I haven't got the mate to give you. But it can't be helped. Well, goodbye, doctor." After the departure of Sasha, the doctor looked for a long time at the candelabrum, and scratched his head. "This is beautiful, all right," he thought. "It would be a pity to throw it away, and yet I dare not keep it. Now who in the world is there to whom I can present or donate it?" After long deliberation, he hit upon a good friend of his, the lawyer Chekhov, to whom he was indebted for legal services. "Fine!" chuckled the doctor. "Being a close friend of his, I cannot very well offer him money, and so I will give him this piece of indecency instead. And he's just the man for it, single, and somewhat of a gay bird, too. No sooner thought than done. Dressing himself, the doctor took the candelabrum and went to the home of Chekhov. "Good morning, old chap," he said. "I have come here to thank you for your trouble. You will not take money, and I will therefore repay you by presenting you with this exquisite masterpiece. Now say for yourself, isn't it a dream?" As soon as the lawyer caught sight of it, he was exhilarated with its beauty. "What a wonderful work of art!" He laughed uproariously. "Ye gods, what conceptions artists will get in their heads! What a alluring charm! Where did you get this, little dandy?" But now his exhilaration had oozed away, and he became frightened. Looking stealthily toward the doctor, he said, "But I can't accept it, old chap. You must take it right back." "Why?" asked the doctor in alarm. Because my mother often visits me. My clients come here. And besides, I would be disgraced even in the eyes of my servants." "Don't say another word," cried the doctor, gesticulating wildly. "You simply have got to accept it. It would be rank ingratitude for you to refuse it. Such a masterpiece! What motion, what expression! You will greatly offend me if you don't take it." If only there were daubed over or covered with fig leaves. But the doctor refused to listen to him. Gesticulating even more wildly, he ran out of Chekhov's house in the thought that he was rid of the present. When the doctor was gone, the lawyer carefully examined the candelabrum, and then, just as the doctor had done, he began to wonder what in the world could he do with it. A very beautiful object, he thought. It is a pity to throw it away, and yet it is disgraceful to keep. I had best present it to someone. I've got it. This very evening I'm going to give it to the comedian Shoshkin. The rascal loves such things, and besides, this is his benefit night. No sooner thought than done. That afternoon the well-packed candelabrum was brought to the comedian Shoshkin. That whole evening the dressing room of the comedian Shoshkin was besieged by men who hastened to inspect the present, and during all the time the room re-echoed with hilarious laughter, which most closely resembled the neighing of horses. And any of the actresses approached the door and said, "May I enter?" The hoarse voice of Shoshkin was immediately heard to reply, "Oh, no, 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 my darling, you mustn't. I am not dressed." After the performance, the comedian shrugged his shoulders, gesticulated with his hands, and said, "Now, what in the world am I to do with this? I live in a private apartment. I am often visited by actresses, and this isn't a photograph that one could conceal in a drawer." "Why don't you sell it?" suggested the wigmaker. "There's a certain old woman who buys up antique bronzes. Her name is Smirnova. You had better take a run over there. They'll show you the place all right. Everyone knows her." The comedian followed his advice. 2 days later, Chekhov, his head supported on his hand, was sitting in his office concocting pills. Suddenly the door was opened, and in the office rushed Sasha. He was smiling radiantly, and his breast heaved with joy. In his hands he held something wrapped in newspaper. "Doctor," he cried breathlessly, "imagine my joy! As luck would have it, I've just succeeded in getting the mate to your candelabrum. Mother is so happy. I am the only son of my mother. You have saved my life." And Sasha, quivering with thankfulness and rapture, placed the candelabrum before the doctor. The latter opened his mouth as if to say something, but uttered not a word. His power of speech was gone. The Scandal Monger is the next chapter. Boy, these Russian writers, they never name anyone John. Akhinev, Akhineyev, Akhinev, the teacher of penmanship, was marrying off his daughter, Natalia, to Loshhinkink, the instructor in geography and history. The wedding festivities were in full swing. The hall resounded with singing, playing, and the scuffle of the dancing feet. Hired servants in black frock coats and dirty white cravats were scurrying madly about the room. Tarantuzlov, the instructor in mathematics, the Frenchman Pastakoy, and Mizda, the junior inspector, were seated together upon the sofa, telling the guests, amidst many interpretations and corrections of each other, all the cases known to them of persons having been buried alive, and were moreover airing their views upon spiritualism. None of the three believed in spiritualism, to be sure, but they were willing to admit that there was much in this world that could not be explained by human intelligence. In another room, Dodonsky, teacher of literature, was explaining the circumstances under which a sentry might fire upon civilians. The conversation was, as you see, a trifle gruesome, yet highly animated. Through the windows, from without, looked in a crowd of envious people whose social position did not grant them the privilege of entrance. At exactly 12 o'clock, the master of the house, Akhinev, stepped into the kitchen to see whether all was ready for the wedding supper. From floor to ceiling, the kitchen steamed with an aroma of geese, ducks, and countless other appetizing dishes. Upon two tables were beheld an artistic disorder, the ingredients of a truly Lucullian banquet. And Marfa, the cook, a buxom woman with a 2-story stomach, was busy about the table. "My dear woman, just let me have a look at that fish," requested Akhinev. Chuckled and rubbing his palms together. What a delicious odor! Enough to make you eat the whole kitchen up. Let's see that fish, do." Marfa went over to one of the chairs and, carefully removed a greasy newspaper, underneath which were reposed upon a gigantic platter a huge whitefish garnished with capers, olives, and vegetables. Akhinev looked at the fish and almost melted with rapture. His countenance beamed. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He leaned forward and with his lips made a sound resembling the squeal of an ungreased axle. For a moment he stood motionless, then snapped his fingers and smacked his lips again. "Ah! The music of a passionate kiss." "Whom are you kissing there, Marfa?" came a voice from the adjoining room, and in the doorway there appeared the close-cropped head of Akhinev's colleague, Yannikin. "Who is the lucky fellow, ah? Fine, Mr. Yakhinov himself. Bravo, Grandpa. Excellent. A nice little tete-a-tete with a charming lady." "I'm not kissing anybody," retorted Akhinov, embarrassed. "What an idea, you! I was merely smacking my lips with delight as I looked upon the fish here." Then Yannikin's features wrinkled with laughter, and he disappeared. Akhinev turned red. "The deuce," he thought. "Now this fellow is going around everywhere gossiping about me. A thing like this can easily spread through the whole city, the jackass." Akhinev returned to the hall shyly, and glanced furtively in all directions for Yannikin. That worthy was standing by the piano telling something in his most cavalier-like manner to the inspector's mother-in-law, who smiled in evident pleasure. It's about me, he suspected. Akhienev about me. Devil take that rascal. And she believes every word and laughs. Such a silly goose, good God. No, I must not allow this, no. I must do something to discredit him in advance. I'll speak to everybody about the indecent and unmask him as a stupid gossip monger. Akhienev scratched himself and then, still in embarrassment, walked over to Pas de Quoi. I was just in the kitchen and to settle some details about the supper, he said to the Frenchman. I know that you're very fond of fish, and I've got one down there about 2 yards long. Yes, and then, I almost forgot it, in the kitchen just now. Such a funny joke, you see. I come into the kitchen and want to take a look at the dishes. I see the fish, and from sheer delight, such a splendid specimen, I smacked my lips. So, and at that very moment in pops the bad sheep, Vanyenkin, and says, ha ha ha, and says, aha, you're kissing somebody here? Such a fool, imagining that I was kissing Marfa the cook. Why, that woman looks as if, fie, to kiss a thing like her. There's a fool for you, such a doob. Who's that? Asked Tartantalov, coming in. Vanyenkin. You see, I come into the kitchen. The tale of Marfa and the fish was repeated. Think of it! Why, I'd just as soon kiss a mongrel as kiss Marfa. And Akhienev, turning around, noticed Mr. Mazda. We were just speaking of Yankin, said Akhienev to Mazda. Such a simpleton. Pops into the kitchen, sees me near Marfa and cook, and at once makes up a whole story. So, you're kissing Marfa, says he to me. He was a little bit tipsy, upon my word. And I answered that I'd sooner kiss a turkey than kiss Marfa. And I reminded him, too, that I was a married man. Think of his silly idea. Ridiculous. What's ridiculous? Asked the rector, happening to pass by. That chap Vankin. I'm in the kitchen, you understand, looking at the fish. And so forth. In the course of a half hour, nearly all the guests were fully informed of the story of the fish. Now, let him tell as many people as he wishes, thought Akhienev, rubbing his palms. Just let him. As soon as he begins, I can say to him, spare your breath, dear friend. We know all about it already. And the thought so comforted Akhienev that he drank 4 glasses more than were good for him. After the supper, he led the newlywed couple to the bridal chamber, went to bed, and slept like a log. By the next morning he had forgotten the tale of the fish completely. But whoa! Man proposes and God disposes. The evil tongue accomplished its wicked work, and Akhyenev's cunning was all in vain. Exactly a week later, on a Wednesday, just after the 3rd lesson had begun, and Akhyenev was standing in the classroom correcting an exaggerating slope of the pupil Vishkin's handwriting, the director... the slope of the pupil Vishkin's handwriting, okay. The director stepped over to him and called him to one side. My dear Mr. Akhyenev, said the director, you will pardon me. It is really none of my business, but I must speak to you about it. It is my official duty. You must know that the rumor is running through this city that you have a certain relation with your cook. Of course, it is no affair of mine, as I have said, but live with her, kiss her, to your heart's content, but I beg of you not so publicly. I beg of you, do not forget your high calling. A cold shiver ran down Akinyanev's spine, and he lost his self-composure, as if he had been stung by a gigantic swarm of bees or scalded with boiling water. He flew to his home. On the way, it seemed to him that the whole city were staring at him, as if he had been tarred and feathered. At home, a new vexation was awaiting him. "Why don't you eat?" asked his wife at dinner time. "What are you dreaming about? Your love? Are you yearning for Marfa? You Mohammedan, you! I know everything. My eyes have been opened, you barbarian!" And slap! He received a blow over the cheek. He rose from the table, and as if in a trance, he neither hat nor coat. He went to Vankin. He found Vankin at home. "You slanderer!" he cried, Akinyanov turning upon him. "Why have you soiled my reputation before the whole world? How dare you have slandered me?" "What do you mean, slandered? Where did you ever get that notion?" "Then who did invent the story that I have been kissing Marfa? I suppose it wasn't you, eh?" Venkin's eyes began to blink. His whole lively countenance was convulsed with twitching. Raising his eyes to the icon in the corner, he cried out, "My God, punish me! I swear by the salvation of my soul that I never repeated a word of the story. May I be cursed with eternal damnation. May I—" There was no questioning Vankin's sincerity. It was clear that he had not spread the gossip. "But who then? Who?" muttered Akinyanov, beating his fist against his breast and mentally going over the list of all his friends. "Who then?" I think we'll stop there for part 3 of The Kiss and Other Stories.